Where did I get my blue jacket? Oh, I got professional photos done yesterday. Some of them were with my blue jacket boys. Whew, prepare to be triggered. Hey, what's up, buddy?
Hey, what's up?
Okay. So you emailed me because you wanted to discuss Rogue One, and you said that you had some kind of background in film criticism. Was it schooling, or what was that? So everybody knows.
Um, it wasn't really schooling. I've been writing a show slash creating a show for the past, I guess, 4 years now. Yeah,
Okay.
be about 4 years. And I kind of, well, what I do on my spare time and whatnot is, whenever I watch a show or movie or whatever, I spend a lot of time analyzing it and kind of figuring out, due to, I guess, understanding of emotion and a bunch of other things. I spend a lot of time trying to get down into the best way something could be, or if it's bad given the circumstances, or whatever else. So
Okay.
that's kind of mainly what I do.
And then your contention was that Rogue One was generally a good film?
I think it was entertaining.
Okay, let's start off. Okay, so obviously this is bullshit and arbitrary, but like if you had to score it on a scale from 1 to 10, what would you give it? I would give it probably like a 4 or maybe a 3 or a 4.
4 or 3. I guess that depends on how you rate your entertainment value, like with music and visuals and you know
Okay,
the action, whatever.
I would generally give it like a 3 or 4. If I was rating it personal to me, I would give it a 1. So if that helps at all. I would give it like a 3 or 4 like in general. But you would rate it higher? What would you how good?
Um, well, generally, I'm a little bit polite with this because I consider like all of the above. I thought like the space battles and stuff were, entertaining, but it's Star Wars, right? That's kind of what it is. The story I thought was, yeah, probably. Story was definitely dog trash. I mean, like if you're going to write the problem with Rogue One lies at the concept in general, no? Like collecting the blueprints for the Death Star. It's like a repeated story or similar to a repeated story that they've always done with their movies and whatever else.
I don't actually think that's a weak point. I think that you can repeat stories or concepts and still make them really entertaining. There's a lot of stories that are, repetitious of anything else. You can see all of shonen, for example, in anime, or classic heroes' tales in all of movies, right?
To an extent, I guess. I mean, it depends on the person, really. I mean, I think what everybody wants to see is something a little different. Like there's been a lot of talk recently, something about Obi-Wan doing his like on his background story of Obi-Wan, or like doing his detective stuff and all that. That was really entertaining for a lot of people, and that would be a little bit different.
Hmm.
Just stuff like that, for example. There's a lot they can do with a giant universe like Star Wars, and they kind of end up doing similar to the same things over again.
Yeah, that's definitely a negative, I would say. They seem to be very scared to expand upon the universe at all. And the universe actually almost feels a little bit dead. As sad
Yep.
as it is to say. I guess if I were to compare it to, say, the Harry Potter universe feels like not only is the universe really well expanded upon, I think you can say that actually by J.K. Rowling. She expands on it quite well. You get a feeling that there's even more outside of what you already know, right? That there's a larger universe laying even beyond what you know, right? When other schools
Yep.
come in for that Triwizard tournament, and when other things are referenced, you get a scope of this universe, right? Whereas in Star Wars, every new movie, it seems like it still fits into that same fold of lore that we're already familiar with, and you really don't really venture outside of that at all. Yeah.
Yep. Skywalker's midichlorians, dude. That's where we're at.
I think didn't that get retconned? Didn't they say starting at episode 7 they weren't gonna acknowledge the midichlorian shit?
I don't even know. I can't remember. No, I actually don't know. But I read something on it after I watched episode 7. They were posting stuff on the lore on their website about it, and I read something about a factoid on midichlorians on their website. So
Oh, then maybe there
I
is.
don't
Know.
know.
So I guess so I'm gonna make a general criticism and then focus it to Rogue One. A general criticism that I've had of movies today. Are you familiar? Have you seen all of Nolan's films?
Yes, Nolan's films. I like them because of the layers and complexity of them more
Okay.
than anything else. But
So
yeah, go on.
I feel like okay, I am not a professional film critic, and there's a lot of films that I haven't seen. So
Sure, same.
just keep that in mind. But I have watched all of Nolan's films. So I feel
Yep.
like Nolan's films serve as this perfect microcosm to analyze what has happened to film in general. So if we take his first two films, oh fuck, what's the one where the guy loses Memento? If you take oh fuck, hold on one second. Yo, any tips on how to remove the microphones? The
Yo,
government
any
keeps putting in
tips
my
on how
dogs.
to remove the
Nice fucking meme, dude. Okay, I'm sorry. So if you look at the first two films, Memento and The Prestige, right? These are
Wait,
film.
sorry, I have to interrupt you.
Yeah.
With Memento, I don't really remember too much from it because it's been a really long time since I've seen it, but I remember The Prestige.
Okay, sure.
Anyways,
And
go
then
on.
okay, but regardless, for these two films, I you first of all, these films have a razor sharp focus on the story that they're trying to tell, and
Mhm.
I don't think there is a single scene that you could remove from either of these movies that wouldn't like damage that story, right? You can say
Wait, you
that at
mean
least with the Prestige, right? In the Prestige, there isn't anything extraneous that you could just remove from the film that
you're right?
wouldn't
Yeah.
damage the end, right? Like it's all needed to tell the story that it's trying to tell,
Yes.
right? If you scoot on a little bit farther down Nolan's timeline and we take a look at something like Interstellar, there is a lot of a serious lack of focus. Things become very
Hmm.
blurry and hesitant. If you try to like what stories like Interstellar has a lot of different themes and stories woven into it, most of which go unexplored. So, for
Yeah.
instance, we spend a lot of the film talking about the importance of science, and then in the middle of the film, we get this speech by Dr. Brennan about how love trumps science or something. I don't know. It's very strange. You have in the beginning of the film, it looks like you have a science and dreams of going beyond versus practical engineering and doing things to survive, right? Remember when he goes to the school and the teachers are like, we don't need engineers, we need farmers, right? And it's like, okay, well, what's more important, science and looking to the future, or just right? There's like that theme there of like exploration and discovery versus
Right.
necessity and pragmatism, right? But that never really gets highlighted on. There's the entire story, or I'm sorry, it never gets expanded upon, right? Do you disagree with that, or?
Well, like, I mean, they kind of do near the end with like the colony idea and whatnot. I don't know.
But not really. Like, is that really themes of like, science versus pragmatism, or like dreaming versus being super rooted in reality? Right? Because like when you have the beginning of a movie and you get this scene where it's like your girl wants to grow up and explore, space and beyond, but we don't need that. We just need farmers, right? Like that kind of a
Sure.
thing. Like that's an interesting theme, right? Right that you could explore a lot in the movie, but it's not really dealt with at all. The whole story between her and her brother is like kind of awkward, and her burning the farm down and all of that at the end, like that's not really ever expanded upon, right? Basically, what I'm saying is like in Interstellar, there's a lot of like extraneous stuff that's like out there, and you could trim away a lot from that movie, and you
Yeah.
wouldn't really hurt the end of it, right? It lacks the focus that Nolan's first two films had, right? And then with the Batman trilogy, you run into a lot of problems by the third movie, a lot of extraneous stuff, a lot of plot elements that don't really make sense.
Yeah. Can I say something really quick?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, interrupt me if you want.
Sorry. I mean, do you want to just like jump from movie to movie, or like say a few things about each movie? Like what do you want to do on this term?
Yeah. Well,
Because I
basically,
have a lot I could say about each one. So like
oh yeah,
this
sure. I'm not
movie.
saying that any of these are bad movies. I'm trying to make the argument that in general, it seems like movies have lost focus over time. Do you disagree with that with Nolan's films? And then I guess you can defend if you disagree.
Well, I mean, like Interstellar was solely based on the concept of the seventh dimension and whatnot. Like if you go back, the entire film wouldn't be able to work if the dimensional concept wasn't existent in there, right? Because it was going through the black hole and seeing yourself back in time and all that other stuff, right? Spoiler alert! Don't don't listen if you don't want anything to be spoiler.
Hmm.
But yeah, no. I think I don't know. I heard a lot of things about Interstellar and that it was supposed to be more complicated with the black hole and dimensional concept, like the movie as itself. But they ended up dumbing it down because a lot of people wouldn't understand it, and whatever else. If that's true, then that's probably why. I mean, I don't think that's a really good excuse to dumb it down personally, but I don't know who has priority over that. But I think a large reason for these not feeling as complicated or as many layers and whatever else as they used to have is largely because of that. I don't know.
Well, I'm not talking about like specific plot elements or dumbing things down. I'm just talking about like very broad themes of film,
Yes.
right? Like if I were to take like the theme of Memento. What is Memento about? Memento is a movie about lying to yourself to make yourself feel better, right? And then there may be micro themes that are explored, but for the most part, like it's that idea of is ignorance bliss, right? If you could lie to yourself to give yourself the ultimate, chase of revenge, is it right? That's kind of what the general theme of the movie is, and everything in the movie plays into that. Or in the Prestige, if you had to say like, what's the theme of the Prestige, right? Like, is it? I mean, depending on which character you analyze, right? Is it worth it to give up everything, to perfect a good trick? Or how much are you willing to sacrifice, for your craft or whatever, right? If you look at the
Right.
the guy
Read
that
my
drowns
chat,
himself
dude.
over and again, right? Like, and these are major themes in the movie that every single scene plays into, right? Now, if you had to give me a single major overarching theme for Interstellar, what would it be?
What would it be? Well, Interstellar. No.
It's a
Well, it
lot
would be
harder
the
to name it, right? Like, it's a really
well, seventh
hard.
dimension. That's really it. Like
Well,
that's
but
what the
that's not
entire
really
thing's
like,
based on.
but that's not really like a theme of the movie. That's just like a plot element.
Yeah,
Like, what's
no,
like the
it's
theme of the movie, right? Is
it's
it
trying
that,
to discover a new world, isn't it? That you could like live on and colonize, etc. Isn't that the point of it?
yeah, I mean, you could argue that's like a
Don't
major
they
theme.
say that though?
They do say it, but does the film support it? Because
A little bit, yeah.
you
Not-
get a
not
lot
too
of
much.
different themes, like the weird third act with Matt Damon's character. This idea of personal and preservation of the family versus sacrificing for all of mankind, right? That was a theme
Right.
that was hardcore, like just thrown in at the third act that had never been expanded upon or even hinted at in the beginning of the film. And it was like, oh shit! And then that became like the dominating thing for like 10 minutes, and then that was completely thrown away. Like, yeah, but Interstellar ran all over with that, right?
Sure, yeah. One thing I generally say, actually, not generally, one thing I say to basically everybody I talk to about movies is I think movies are slowly dying, weirdly enough, because the idea that unless they figured out a way, kind of like how the old Star Wars movies were made on terms of like 4, 5, and 6, how it kind of felt like you were watching things in a row as they were happening from current point on. There wasn't like flashbacks or anything crazy like that, right? I think things need to be turned into TV on terms of storytelling, or show for that matter, like Netflix, whatever else, because there's not enough time to tell a fleshed out story of fleshed out characters. Rogue One is a very damn good example of this.
Well, but I feel like as long
in
as you
film.
keep things simple enough, and then getting onto
This
Rogue
chat
One.
reminds
But simple, is that the best, like is it
Well,
worth making things simple and
Yeah, like I
whatever
think The
else?
Prestige is a very good movie. I think The Prestige is an awesome movie, and it's very simple. Relatively speaking, even though it's
Well, a lot of people would not be able to follow The Prestige, though.
No, I
Well,
don't
I do
know.
agree on
think
terms
I
of
think
that,
that
but-
most people could follow The Prestige pretty well. I mean, it has like it's all kind of wrapped up, but every single scene in that movie plays into the ultimate point of the movie, right? And by the time you finish watching it, I don't think you have any doubt about what's happened or what the movie is trying to communicate or what
yeah,
it's leaving you
yeah.
to think about, right? But looking at Rogue One, where you say like flesh out of millions of characters, right? Well, that's one of the big problems with Rogue One. Rogue One had a ton of characters, and none of them are really expanded upon, right?
Yeah, it would not. Rogue One in itself and its concept and everything does not work as a movie. It just does not.
Well, like I don't know. I feel like the concept of trying to find the plans for the Death Star and then really and then getting them.
It depends what the focus is besides that, though, right?
Yeah, well,
because it focuses on like a crew of people and what's going on with them and all that shit, and then the plan for them. Spoiler alert. Is for literally all of them to die, which is kind of expected shortly into the movie. But like just killing off the characters, you don't feel any attachment. You don't feel absolutely anything towards them at all. You even flesh out the main character's backstory for the good half portion of the movie and whatnot. And there's no point, literally 0 point to it. Because
Yeah,
there's-
sure, I agree. And it's not that there's 0 point because she dies, because just because they die.
No,
doesn't
of
make
course,
it a worthless-
you're right. But
Yeah.
like with how everything else on top of that was, put together, right?
Yeah, but
with all the other
basically-
characters and whatever else.
Prequels are so this is a big problem that people okay, so here's I have a question for you, right? Let's say that somebody creates an anime or a movie or a TV show, and then after that, let's say somebody creates a prequel. What do you think is the best order to watch things in?
Okay, this is a good question because I have an after story, a prequel story, and a large portion of my own show completed and planned already. So for me, on terms of this, right now what I'm doing is I'm creating my standard main story for my show, for example. And this is a show, it's not a movie, I apologize in advance. But what I do, I don't know, the way I'm going to release things is main story and then either sequel or prequel. Because if I were to release one of the other ones first, then the main story wouldn't have as much meaning to it and a bunch of other things like that. And it would feel a little bit, it wouldn't exactly feel off, but it's kind of like how everything came to be and whatnot, right?
Okay, no, listen, that's okay. So that answer is perfect. Do you read it all a lot, or?
I mean, what do you mean by like books?
Yeah.
It depends.
Have you ever read? I'm reaching here. Okay, I don't read much at all. Have you ever read Interview with a Vampire?
No.
Okay.
I think the
So
last thing I wrote was like "Catch Me If You Can" or something. I don't know.
sure. So this is a little shit test. Usually,
Oh,
if people answer this wrong, I know to ignore a lot of what they're saying.
yeah, sure, go for
A
it.
prequel, you never watch the prequel before the actual show. That's ridiculous because the
Yes,
prequel is heavily informed by
yes,
the main show, right? Like
yeah,
oftentimes the prequels can do a few things. They can give you a deeper understanding of the source material, and they draw a lot of influence from the source material, right?
yes, exactly.
So I guess yeah. So if you look at it in that light, do you play video games at all?
I have a good amount of video games. Yes,
Have you played the Metal Gear Solid games?
I've played Metal Gear, the most recent one, and I've seen a bunch of the other ones. I guess a bunch, not a bunch, but a decent amount. I've seen
Okay,
some of the
sure.
main videos, whatever.
So in Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, you play, well, Metal Gear Solid 1, you play Snake, legendary soldier, right? And you know that there
Right,
was another guy called Big Boss, right? And you know that he was
right.
a bad dude, right? So when Metal Gear Solid 3 rolls around, well, you already know that the main character you're playing is going to turn into a bad dude. So, like, what's the point of even playing the game? Well, no, right? That's not true
That's,
at all, right? The
want to
point is
figure out
you
how it came
flesh
to
out
be.
the character, you give him
Yeah.
so much more backstory, you make him more understandable. Why did he become a bad guy, right?
Make it interesting.
Yeah, sure. Like there's a lot of awesome story that can be told there, right? Or similarly, the prequels, right? Like when Red Letter Media said, "Is this a story that that needed to be told?" Right? When he said that, I thought that was a ridiculous statement. The guy that stars in Half in the Bag, I don't remember his fucking name, but like the idea of where does Darth Vader come from? That he is this evil character, but in Return of the Jedi, at the end, you see that he was actually, good inside himself and in his heart or whatever, right? That he had it in him. Well, that's an interesting story. How did Darth Vader end up being right? These are awesome stories that you can tell. The reason I say this is because I get very upset when people say, well, in Rogue One, everyone's going to die anyway, so what does it matter?
Sure.
No, no way. Like, there's a lot of awesome stuff, right?
No,
So,
you're 100% right. I have things that I wrote about that as well, just so I make sure I have some more info to bring to the table about that
yeah.
too.
So I guess my question is, when you look at Rogue One, so here are my questions about Rogue One. One, what story is Rogue One telling? Two, what is Rogue One drawing from in the universe to tell that story? Like, what understanding of, the universe are you drawing from to tell the story? And then three, how is it expanding upon your influence of that world? Right, or your perception of that world, right? To use one more quick example, I'm sorry. There's a book called The Vampire Lestat. The main character. I don't remember any of their fucking names. It was a long time ago when I read this shit. But the main character is like a noble dude that's turned into a vampire by this evil dude called Lestat, and Lestat is basically a giant asshole to him the entire fucking book. And then you read Interview with a Vampire, and then in the second book, you read something. The name of the book is The Vampire Lestat. And in that book, you actually find out that that Lestat, the evil vampire, actually wasn't evil at all, and he had good motivation for everything that he did, where he came off as really evil, right? So when you're reading that, you're going into it with all of these perceptions and these preconceived notions, right? But it changes your understanding of the source material. All of a sudden, you have a much different way, a different paradigm of viewing the source. And it's like, oh wow, like even though the
There's something I'm
second
doing
book,
like that on my show too. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, right? Like, yeah, so it gives you, it totally shades your understanding of the first book in a really awesome way, right? So when you look at Rogue One, I feel like it fails on all three of these counts. I feel like it doesn't really it doesn't take any understanding of what is the rebellion or what is the empire.
Right.
It doesn't really add anything at
Yep.
all to the
I know
universe.
ways they could fix that. I think.
I can think of tons of ways they can fix it. I'm not a story writer at all, or anything, but yeah, I can think of tons of ways.
Yeah, like
Oh,
Leia, for example, is a character that could have backstory and fleshed out upon more. And her like terrible one-liner at the very end of the film, like they could have done things with specific characters in the rebellion, like big characters like Leia, for example, and
sure.
have them intertwine with everything, and kind of what's happened to her, what's like her life been, like and all this other stuff. And there's a lot they could do with that. I think personally, like how
Yeah,
the
for
fuck
sure.
did Leia magically end up?
Yeah,
at
yeah,
the end?
but don't give me my side of the argument. You have to tell me why did you? I guess I'm giving you all my problems with Rogue One. Why did you think that despite all of these problems, which you seem to agree with me on, why was it still like a good movie for you?
Well, good. I mean, okay, so my perception of good. If I say something's good, I will legitimately mean it's technically good. Rogue One is not a good film on terms of technicality. It's an entertaining film, I would say. I don't exactly think I would see it again. I would never pay for it again, right? And I mean,
What
I
the
didn't.
fuck? I thought you were here to tell me why it was a decent movie.
I'm talking about decent on the entertainment value of the movie. And I never told you in my email that I wanted to tell you why it was a decent movie.
Okay. Well, why do you think it was decent, I guess, on an entertaining value? What were some of the entertaining scenes for you?
Well, I mean, like it's Star Wars. There's space battles and other stuff like that. Like, the pile driver when they pile drive the Imperial ship into the shields and stuff like that. I don't know, stuff like that. It was just entertaining. I don't know. Like, I was like, oh shit. And the robot was, he was entertaining. He was funny. His liners were whatever. That's something I enjoyed personally in terms of that.
So when I look at fight scenes or when I look at like battle
Sure.
scenes, I feel like a lot of the entertainment from these scenes comes from the drama portion, right? So
Should at least. Yeah.
yeah, sure. So okay, so I have no educational background in this. If there are different words I could use, feel free to let me know, or whatever, right? But when I think of drama, what I think of is characters that are important to me, or an outcome that is important to me is involved in a conflict, and the tension that arises is a result of you being unsure of exactly how it's going to turn out. So you could look to something like Game of Thrones is an example of like the fight between Oberyn and the Mountain, right? There is a lot of drama there, right? You have a fight between two characters that is determining the fate of many characters. Or let's say in universe in Star Wars, Luke flying into the Death Star, right? Where he fucking goes crazy and turns off his fucking computer and trusts in the Force, right? There's a lot of drama here where he's being chased by Darth Vader and the two other dudes, right? Or any of the space battles in episodes 4, 5, and 6 typically have a lot of drama involved in them because there are characters that you've grown attached to and you care about, and there are outcomes that are tied to these dramatic conflicts that you very much care about. So the problem I have is that when you look at the Rogue One space battles, none of the important characters are really involved in the space battles themselves. These are all relatively nameless figures. They try to introduce them like Blue One or Orange, Red Leader, Orange
Oh, this
Leader.
is actually a good point that you just made, because like if you're thinking, the true reality of Rogue One is like the first half of the movie is a drama, right? But then the second half doesn't really feel like a drama. It kind of like everybody just slowly, I guess quickly at the same time, kind of dies off. Before I get to that, one thing I did kind of enjoy was how they died. It kind of felt like if they tried to make those characters live in these situations, it would have been fucking retarded. So that they actually killed them off there, I thought that was like one thing they did kind of okay.
I guess, except all of their deaths were very, very undramatic, right?
I am the Force. The Force is with me.
Well, yeah, but like, but oftentimes I mean, like, this is just one storytelling tool, and there's a million other ways you can do it. But oftentimes, the way that we get drama from a character's death is to be witnessed by other characters, right? That's something that was totally absent in every single character death,
except for the bounty hunter guy or whatever, and the dude.
Well, yeah, he was the one guy, but like because if you look at the whole crew, you had the guy in the ship, right, who was doing something with the radio, and then somebody just randomly tossed a grenade in, and he died, and nobody knew about it or cared about it, right?
Nobody.
And then you had
I mean, there might have been comm problems, but that's it.
And then you had like the two dudes that were walking on the ground, and then they died, and then nobody really cared about them, right? If you compare this death to say like Boromir in Lord of the Rings, right? When Boromir dies, he goes out fighting very heroically, right? He fights,
Feel
and he
that
takes
shit.
out, yeah, but you don't just feel it. Like if he would have died in a valley alone, that would have been a lot different than having, the whole cast there with him that witnesses his death, and then all of their characters are then impacted by his death, right? That would be a lot different for him to just randomly die off in a field fighting fucking orcs like somewhere else, right?
Yeah, no, Lord of the Rings does a really good depiction of like the characters are dying or almost dying, Frodo and whatever else. And it kind of makes you worried and feel, it makes it more dramatic and everything else. Yeah, Rogue One didn't really do that. While the death scenes were realistic, you can exact realism in some cases. While I do strive to show realism in my work, and I love realism in everything else, like that's something I think needs to be added in pretty much everything, unless it's like a pure fantasy show or whatever, But I think realism can be sometimes actually a bad thing, because too much realism can be a bad thing, right? Like,
well, yeah, and it also depends on the theme of exactly what it is that you're showing. Like in some things, the drama comes from the realism. I wish I could think of an example, but like I know what you're talking about, where it's like where somebody is just killed and there is no fanfare or funeral or witness, and it's like that's some real.
That's
you
not
could
a
argue,
story.
Yeah, well, no, but I mean, like you could argue that scenes in Saving Private Ryan, like when the sniper is in that tower and then the tank blows him up or whatever, right? Like even though the other characters aren't witnessing it and crying about him, like that's drama there because that that is a war film, right? I have a lot of problems with people calling this a war film. I don't think it was a war film at all.
A lot
Because
of people actually, even popular critics, are calling it that.
yeah, but it's
We're
not
gonna
at all. It
run
doesn't.
with
If you
It's
compare
not.
it to like Black Hawk Down or Saving Private Ryan or whatever, like these are war films that explore the ravages of war-torn
beach.
areas and and these the massive loss of life and these two sides depicted by. This was not a war film at all, not in any sense of the word. Other than the superficial fact that there are groups fighting each other, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think what they're mainly talking about is that the director or the writers or whatever tried to depict that. On their Storm the Beach version of it in Rogue One, they definitely tried to depict it, and they didn't do a very good job of it.
Well, but the problem is the first hour of the film is trying to build up individual
Drama
story before
and
you
backstory, and then it goes into something that's completely different.
yeah, before you totally try to make that awkward
Exactly.
pivot towards yeah.
That's why I said it would work in TV if you fleshed out Jyn Erso's character and went heavily in depth to it. Then you did that with other characters as well. You could do stuff like bring in characters like Leia, whatever, blah 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 blah. Go about this all day and make their deaths meaningful, because you absolutely don't care about these characters. The Mimi Asian dude that talks about the Force all the time, that's basically a Jedi without a lightsaber, whatever. That character could have been maybe potentially more entertaining. I mean, if he was even not entertaining to begin with, if you actually knew more than the fact that he was just like a blind monk-esque Force user Jedi guy. I don't know.
Governments in my dog's chemtrails any
I definitely agree. I don't know. These were all problems with the film. I thought that the first and then when you look at the themes of the film, and the stories of the film, I think that you could have cut everything having to do with the black dude in the film. I think could have been cut out.
Except for maybe the message.
Character. Well, she could have because even the message was delivered by the pilot dude. Maybe he could have just ran into her, right? That's
that's not a bad point.
Entire part of the story. And that's 10, 20, 30 minutes of screen time. I think everything having to do with him could have been completely axed from the movie, and it wouldn't have suffered at all for it, right? I don't know if you needed the pilot dude that delivered that thumb drive. I don't know if you needed his story at all. I feel like there was such a huge cast of characters for no reason, and none of them were expanded upon. I feel like that was a really big problem with the film.
If you think about that a little more, though, when you realize a bunch of it, pretty much half plus maybe more of the movie could have been cut, right? They flesh out Jyn Erso's backstory, a little bit of it at least. When she's a kid, she sees her mother die, blah 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 blah.
But that's really it. And then we find out from the black dude that she was a child soldier, I guess. But then that's it until she's 16.
Another thing. That's another thing. That would have been interesting to see, her, growing up. Imagine in a show, right? Because I don't think this would be possible on film. Mm-hmm. Imagine seeing her backstory and how she was a soldier and how she's. That's one big deal. They try and make she's portrayed as a strong female protagonist, but lacked almost any personality due to the time they had to flesh out the character or whatever else, right?
Yeah, and one of my big criticisms of The Force Awakens is that I feel like there were a lot of problems with that main character, but even Rey was more fleshed out than the girl in Rogue One, who you literally know nothing about.
Yeah, and you don't know much at all about Rey except for that she scavenges shit and she has a Mary Sue complex on a little bit, at least, on terms of.
No, she definitely does, but at least you know more about her character. You know way more about her character than the Rogue One girl.
For some fucking reason, you still know more about her character given that circumstance.
Yeah, and I feel like if you look at this as a parallel to The Force Awakens, at least The Force Awakens kept their character count very small. You really only worked on 3 or 4 characters, right? You had Finn, who was a star, and then you had Rey, who was a star, and then you had the pilot guy, who was kind of worked on for a little bit of the film, and then kind of like Han Solo, right? And then
the older.
And then the edgy Vader wannabe dude. But they kept the cast of characters small enough in that film that I feel like you got to spend enough screen time with them to care about them towards the end. Whereas in Rogue One, I don't know, there wasn't any character that I gave a fuck about in this film at all. Like in Rogue One, not even close.
Yeah, the first comment one of my buddies told me I went to see the film with said was. I think he really enjoyed the movie, but one thing he said is just I don't know, there's no personality. Why didn't they try and flesh out those two characters' relationship at the very end? They're hugging on the beach or whatever. I guess he was interested in the relationship those two would have had together, given the progressiveness of that too. That's another thing that wasn't really adapted upon, right? They kind of just started looking at each other like they wanted to fuck or whatever, but I don't know. There's just you could literally talk about almost every single thing in Rogue One and break it down and to show why it's not really worth telling or it just wasn't fleshed out enough or there's 3 different things you can consider for it.
Sure. So I guess was there any part of the film analysis I did that you disagreed with?
Um, well, I mean, I know you've talked about it on stream before. I just haven't watched what you've stated about it. Is this everything you talked about?
Yeah, for the most part, I think these are all my problems with the film.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Like personally, things I thought like the Vader parts were a little bit entertaining.
The Vader parts were totally inappropriate for the film, but they were really
Yep, you're right.
entertaining. I don't deny
They were
that.
entertaining,
They were
but
probably the best parts of the film. The Vader thing at the end, especially, but
yeah, I feel like anything I say on criticism, you'll probably agree with me because it is ridiculous. Like,
yeah,
why didn't Vader do anything about the ship leaving? It was right in front of him. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote like 4 paragraphs of stuff to like put my notes off of just in case, um, to add stuff to discussion or whatever. But it seems just too easy to flesh out, I guess. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff I'd be willing to talk about if you wanted to, in terms of story and movie and TV and whatnot. But
Yeah, what about it?
well, what is something that you would be interested in talking about on that term? Like, I guess an example, I mean, something I could say, what is like, I like things for the purpose of telling the story, not on terms of telling it for, via a script of a movie, via a script of a TV or whatever. If that makes any sense, I don't know. I might have to explain that better. A lot of stuff is written very mildly on terms of, like, if you read a script, right?
If I pay you, can
Things
you
have to
help
be
me
written
build my
and read
gaming
a very
PC?
specific way on terms of a movie, and that's the same thing with TV. It's a little bit different.
Wait, what do you mean?
Can't really tell. You can't really tell a proper story via a script nowadays. I don't know if that interests you at all.
You don't think so? What do you mean?
Okay, so I've had to write a decent amount of scripts, and they've all gone through drafts or whatever else. But every time I write a script, I feel that the story is heavily lacking because I'm not able to tell it the way I want, because you have to tell it a certain way without like camera angles or whatever else. You can never get your image of what you want to be shown onto a script, mainly because I guess they would replace you with a director or a more advanced writer or whatever else. But what if you wanted to be the head of your own show or something like that? I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean that's why it's important for the scriptwriter to work with the director, I imagine, no?
Well, what if the scriptwriter wanted to be the director?
Well then, I mean, I don't think those two overlap usually. I mean, I guess it's possible, but like,
They do overlap actually very frequently.
or no, I
but
mean,
it
like
depends
it's
on the
not very.
popularity.
I mean, it's not very common that the scriptwriter is the director, right? Isn't that very rare that somebody that writes the script also directs it?
Well, maybe not writes the initial script.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if that's what you're saying, but in most, if not from at least most of the stuff I've seen, at least recently, they do have a lot to do with the writing of the script.
Wait, the director does?
Yeah.
Aren't scripts usually pitched to studios, and then if somebody's interested in it, then they go shopping for a director, and then it goes through some rewrites where everybody gets on the same page?
It depends. It depends. Yes, on if it's spec scripts, whatever else, that's what they're called. If you don't know what that is, you can find a lot of information on the wiki and whatnot about it. But with standard scripts, say you wanted to create your own show.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess maybe I'm saying this because this is what I do. I mean, if it's not interesting or whatever, you can shut me out. It's perfectly fine and understandable.
Sure.
But when creating your own show or your own content, by writing it via a movie or a TV script, you're extremely limited with the amount of stuff you can do on it. It has to be very technical and towards the standards of somewhat like some company like Hollywood, for example. And you can't really do all the things you would want to do or show all the things you wanted to show. I don't know. It would just be interesting to me if you could show things via like a story format. I don't know. I don't know where I was getting with this. I apologize.
Sure. I mean, if you're just writing a script, you can have a vision in your head, but it might not necessarily come across.
It's not, yeah.
Sure.
No, I was just wondering if you had like any conflicts on that, because people I talk to kind of just agree with that because it's more of like a personal thing. But I was just wondering if that's like something you've ever looked at and been like, no, I completely disagree with, like, it should be the same as the industry standards or whatever else. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I guess it seems like I thought that scriptwriters usually worked with the directors to kind of get their stuff on the same page.
Sometimes. If like they say they start their own show or they want to sell something in particular. Well, okay, no. Let's say they want to start a show. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Say you want to start a show or your own movie or whatever else. It's almost impossible because it generally has to be sold,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you want to do that yourself, it's a very unrealistic goal because of a few obvious reasons that you maybe you're a nobody or whatever else. It's very rare that you'll get your own control of something like that. Because and if you wanted to show your perspective of it, I've gotten technical analysis, for example, on stuff I've done and I've had camera angles and like ways of portraying it. Obviously, too many camera angles can be annoying for the reader or whatever, but there isn't much of a way to describe this on paper unless you're like writing it in a format of a book. But you can't do that when you're writing on a movie or a TV. I was just kind of stating that, like, from that premise, if that's something you disagree with. I don't know.
No, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that. Have you ever, why not write for, just curious, why not write like theater related stuff? It seems like you would have more control. Yeah, writing for like the theater instead of.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you want. Like for me, I want to be able to show like a large universe with a large set of very complex and realistic characters or whatever else, and I want to be able to show their stories heavily in depth and progress it as the right way and stuff like that. And in order to get that vision and show the aesthetic of the show, you have to be able to write it and describe it. But you cannot really do that in movie and TV writing, and you have to do it in very specific tones unless you're the director or they have given you a greenlit head of the show. But that's not something that exists unless you're greenlit for that, right? And if you show them something with that, they deny you. So like, yeah, I don't know.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I was just wondering if you like.
Yeah, no, I mean, it seems like a thing. Like, I mean, I've heard. I mean, anytime like a movie gets fucked, you always hear that, like everybody complains that was involved at every step of the way. The scriptwriter will say like, well, should have never been gimped like this, or a director might say, well, the studio wanted it like this, or yeah. So I mean, yeah, I hear that kind of stuff all the time.
Well, a lot of people that are in the industry currently, if not everybody I've actually looked into or read from or whatever else, or I've gotten criticism from, completely disagrees with me when I say that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just I'm wondering if you disagreed with it as well, because if there are a lot of people not in the industry, because I've asked other people in real life, but they don't know anything or don't care, or they kind of somewhat agree with me because it sounds logical to them, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I just somebody that knows a decent amount, I guess, about story writing, or not story writing, a little bit about criticism of movies. You seem to know a decent amount, given the fact that you're not in the field or anything for that matter. I was just wondering what your opinion was on that.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I just watch things and have an opinion sometimes. I don't think I know too much, but.
All right. Well, if you have any like questions on like technical writing, story writing, or anything to do with movies or whatever, if you want to like break anything down or talk about it, you can always message me about it.
Yeah, sure thing.
All right. Thanks for the discussion.
Yeah, no problem, dude. Thanks a lot.
See you later.
All right. Good job, chat. We did it. I thought it was going to go a little bit differently. Dialogue is extremely hard to write. Good dialogue is often a way to notice if the shit's good. Oh, yeah, sure. I've noticed that. I don't know much about films, but, like, I think that's where Kevin Smith excels, right?